Standards do not extend to unilateral destruction of property.
Observation is public, documented, and undeniable.
This isn't how you handle this.
Keep the cut steady, team. Got it, boss. Check this section here. Nice work, guys. We got it.
This is exactly why adherence to permits, legal authority, and documented property lines matters.
This isn't over.
Yes, it is.
60 trees gone before sunrise? You think this view belongs to you? Claudia Whitmore's voice sliced through the dense morning fog that clung to the lake like a damp veil. Her pink long-sleeve dress pressed neatly while she pointed decisively at the freshly cleared shoreline. The muddy gravel driveway reflecting the pale light as pickup trucks idled quietly, neighbors peering from behind curtains and fishing docks with subtle curiosity. The cold air carrying the scent of wet cedar and the faint echo of rain still dripping from nearby metal roofs. Logan Pierce adjusted the coffee thermos in his hand, letting the cold morning breeze tug at his flannel while he calmly surveyed the 60 felled trees and the expanse of water now visible, each broken trunk a visible violation of property expectation. Yet Logan's gaze remained steady, a controlled smirk forming as he cataloged every detail. The gravel crunching beneath his boots harmonizing with the soft slap of water against the dock pilings. "You are overstepping your authority, Claudia," he said quietly, voice calm but charged with unspoken force, allowing the wind and subtle courthouse echoes to amplify his measured indignation, while her polished smile faltered just enough to reveal the flicker of irritation and doubt. The fog rolled over the water, swirling with lake wind that carried the whispers of neighbors and the distant hiss of pickup exhaust, layering environmental tension on the social exposure Claudia now faced, her posture tight, clipboard clutched as if it could anchor the authority slipping through her fingers. Logan stepped closer to the muddy shoreline, thermos damp with condensation, observing the angles of cleared property, the alignment of the trees that remained, and the subtle markers that would document HOA overreach, each visual cue reinforcing latent legal power and potential liability. While Claudia's gaze darted nervously toward the county offices in the distance, the building faintly visible through fog and rain, a reminder of procedural oversight ready to intervene. The sound of water lapping, combined with distant thunder rolling over the hills and the whisper of wet cedar, layered a cinematic tension that punctuated each subtle micro-expression and shift in body language. Neighbors shifting on docks and driveways, some raising phones discreetly to record the unfolding confrontation, their observation multiplying social consequence. Logan's voice cut through the mist once more, calm, deliberate. "The residents are watching, the rules are clear, and your assumptions of authority will not stand," as he subtly gestured to markers that would serve as irrefutable evidence, fog curling around his silhouette to create a visual framing of control versus entitlement, the cold morning light catching the reflective surfaces of wet gravel and tree stumps, enhancing the atmospheric weight of the confrontation. Every motion, glance, an environmental cue. The muddy shoreline, the lake wind, the distant courthouse rain echoes, the whispering neighbors, the soft crunch of gravel, combined to create a layered sense of power shifting, social pressure building, and subtle humiliation encroaching upon Claudia's previously unchallenged confidence, while Logan maintained his calm, controlled presence, absorbing the emotional stakes and preparing for strategic escalation. "Comment below with your city. Let me see where you're watching from," he added, letting the natural sounds and visual tension frame the moment, leaving viewers on edge as the unfolding legal, social, and emotional escalation promised that nothing about the morning's revelations would settle quietly, and that the story was only beginning. The cold morning air had thickened along the lake, fog curling over the water and drifting through the wet cedar along the muddy shoreline. As Logan Pierce adjusted his coffee thermos and took a slow, measured step across gravel still glistening from the earlier rain, every sound, the soft slap of water against the fishing docks, the faint drip from metal roofs, the whisper of lake wind, layering a subtle tension that amplified the scene. Claudia Whitmore shifted on the gravel driveway, her pink long-sleeve dress brushing wet foliage, lips tight, eyes scanning the assembled neighbors who had begun to edge closer, silent observers exchanging small nods and murmurs, their attention a growing social pressure. You think ignoring permits gives you authority? Logan said, voice calm but firm, eyes locking on her polished, passive-aggressive demeanor, allowing a brief pause to let the weight of observation settle before he gestured toward the cleared trees and subtle markers Logan had placed to document the overreach. Claudia's eyebrows flickered, irritation threading through her composure as she adjusted the clipboard, a minor crack in the veneer of control, while neighbors shifted uneasily, some leaning forward, others retreating behind fences, the social narrative turning, gossip ready to amplify any misstep. Logan crouched slightly, noting the angles of felled trees and water views, pointing subtly toward boundary markers and old zoning stakes, his calm presence emphasizing both strategy and a controlled dominance, while fog pressed against the shoreline, curling around his boots, wrapping the scene in organic suspense. He continued, observation and accountability are visible, Claudia, and community judgment is already forming. As he allowed a micro-expression of understanding to cross his face, the shift from shock to strategic clarity marking his internal evolution, mirrored by the antagonist's growing concern. The wind tugged gently at the rain-soaked cedar, carrying soft murmurs from pickup trucks idling along the driveway. Neighbors' phones discreetly raised, their subtle recordings layering additional social consequence. While Claudia's lips parted slightly, hesitation creeping into her voice. This is merely maintaining standards, the statement thinly veiling her rising panic under the first visible cracks of social reversal. Logan's controlled gaze swept the perimeter, thermos in hand, noting every reaction, the fog over water amplifying each subtle motion, every shift of weight, each glance carrying social meaning, while the quiet slap of lake water punctuated the diner's silence, layering a cinematic, grounded tension. With each neighbor's subtle movement, the social stakes increased, the passive-aggressive manipulation faltering, and Logan's calm intelligence allowed him to read the landscape of both the property and human behavior, turning observation into strategic leverage while Claudia's composure eroded incrementally under the pressure. If you noticed anything that could have been better in this story or video, feel free to leave your feedback. We'd love to improve and make the next video even better. The fog thickened over the lake as Logan Pierce moved deliberately along the muddy shoreline, thermos in hand, each step precise against the gravel driveway, while the distant echo of courthouse rain mingled with soft wind over the water, layering a cinematic tension over the unfolding drama. Claudia Whitmore's polished posture stiffened, her pink long-sleeve dress brushing against wet cedar, clipboard now pressed to her chest as subtle cracks in her entitlement began to appear. Her eyes darted toward neighbors gathering quietly along docks and porches, whispers carrying on the lake breeze, amplifying social pressure and public observation. You are not above the law, Logan. The community trusts our judgment, she said, voice tight but rehearsed, the passive-aggressive control underlying every syllable, while Logan's calm, steady gaze read her micro-expressions, absorbing the minor irritations, the flicker of concern, and translating it into strategic awareness. He stepped closer to a boundary marker, pointing subtly to previous easement lines and permit placements, revealing new legal leverage that exposed HOA overreach, his quiet anger layered with understanding and controlled power, while Claudia's subtle hesitation indicated the first signs of panic under mounting social scrutiny. The neighbors' glances, the faint drip from metal roofs, the soft slap of lake water, and the distant hum of pickup trucks idling along the gravel driveway compounded the layered social consequences, the collective observation heightening Claudia's psychological strain. Logan's voice remained measured. Observation, documentation, and witness presence define accountability, and your authority is no longer absolute. As he subtly gestured to the arrangement of felled trees and markers, the fog curling around his silhouette to amplify the environmental tension and visual power shift. Claudia's lips pressed tighter, her smile faltering, the passive-aggressive control slipping as residents shifted, some avoiding eye contact while others whispered to one another, the gossip spreading like a tangible force, each subtle movement reinforcing Logan's controlled dominance. The cold morning air, mingled with wet cedar and lake wind, wrapped the scene in a prestige legal thriller atmosphere, punctuated by the occasional distant roll of thunder and the echoing slap of water on the docks, each element reinforcing emotional progression and strategic escalation. Every glance from neighbors, the micro-adjustment in posture, the careful placement of visual markers, and the fog-tinged light contributed to layered narrative momentum, escalating the antagonist's emotional and social unraveling, while Logan's strategic transformation became increasingly evident. If you noticed anything that could have been better in this story or video, feel free to leave your feedback. We'd love to improve and make the next video even better. The morning fog hung heavy over the lake, curling around the muddy shoreline as Logan Pierce adjusted his thermos and stepped deliberately across gravel dotted with puddles, each footfall punctuating the diner-like silence, while the distant courthouse rain tapped faintly on metal roofs, echoing across the docks and fishing platforms. Claudia Whitmore shifted, the pink long-sleeve dress brushing against wet cedar and brambles, clipboard clutched tightly, her entitlement now tinged with visible irritation, eyes darting to neighbors along the shoreline, who exchanged subtle nods and whispers, their observation amplifying social pressure. "You cannot dictate over what you do not legally own," Logan said quietly, voice controlled yet layered with a subtle intensity, as he gestured toward the cleared tree line and carefully marked boundaries, revealing new evidence of HOA overreach and hinting at hidden liability, each motion measured to deepen the visual tension and emphasize the power shift. The wind carried faint murmurs from neighbors behind fences and along gravel driveways, while soft thuds of water against pilings and distant pickup exhaust created an organic ambient rhythm, reinforcing the layered emotional pressure, Claudia's passive-aggressive control cracking incrementally as she attempted to maintain composure. Logan scanned the shoreline, noting micro-expressions, subtle shifts in weight, and the way the fog hugged the ground and water's edge, each element enhancing narrative depth and social consequence. His calm, controlled demeanor contrasted sharply with her increasing concern and the rising gossip that spread silently but effectively through the watching residents. He leaned slightly to highlight a zoning marker, allowing the camera of the mind's eye to capture every detail. The felled trees, the property line, the reflective puddles, as tangible evidence of potential HOA misconduct, the cumulative effect drawing the antagonist into a spiral of panic and minor social isolation, while Logan's quiet anger, understanding, and strategic transformation became evident in every measured breath and movement. The soft slap of lake water, the whisper of wind through wet cedar, and the muted hum of distant vehicles accentuated the prestige legal thriller atmosphere, each environmental cue interacting with the escalating tension between antagonist and protagonist, drawing viewers into the continuous shift of social, legal, and psychological power. Logan's voice remained steady. The community observes and accountability follows, a subtle affirmation that emphasized control and strategic dominance, the fog over the shoreline framing both the expanding social consequences and the emerging cracks in Claudia's confidence, neighbors leaning to witness while remaining just out of reach. The layered narrative momentum escalating naturally with each subtle movement and whispered observation. If you noticed anything that could have been better in this story or video, feel free to leave your feedback. We'd love to improve and make the next video even better. The fog over the lake thickened, curling through wet cedar along the muddy shoreline as Logan Pierce moved with deliberate precision, thermos in hand, each step leaving subtle impressions in the damp gravel, while distant courthouse rain echoed faintly off metal roofs, layering an atmospheric tension that resonated with the social stakes building around him. Claudia Whitmore's expression tightened, the pink long-sleeve dress clinging slightly from moisture, clipboard trembling in her grasp as she attempted to reassert her passive-aggressive control, voice smooth but strained. "These actions are for the community's standards," she insisted, though the growing whispers from neighbors along docks and gravel driveways betrayed her rising concern. Logan's calm voice countered, measured and authoritative. "Standards do not override legal property rights, Claudia. Observation is already documenting overreach," as he gestured subtly toward boundary markers and felled tree locations, revealing hidden leverage and latent HOA liability while maintaining a controlled, intelligent posture that radiated quiet power. The lake wind rustled through the wet cedar, carrying faint murmurs of neighbors who subtly shifted closer, leaning over fences and gravel paths, their collective gaze amplifying social pressure and emotional isolation for Claudia, while Logan's quiet anger and strategic clarity became visible in each precise movement and scanning gesture, marking an internal evolution from shock to controlled dominance. Small discoveries. The uneven spacing of removed trees, subtle discrepancies in prior HOA notices, and the alignment of markers with legal easements became visual and legal tools that shifted the power dynamic, each revelation layering tension, while the fog and residual drizzle accentuated the cinematic frame and grounded realism. Claudia's polished confidence faltered as she noted the subtle but increasing evidence of her procedural overreach. Micro-expressions revealing concern and irritation, neighbors' whispered commentary translating into social consequence, the cumulative effect pushing her closer to panic, while Logan maintained an emotionally intelligent, measured calm, orchestrating the scene with a sense of restrained authority that drew attention without overtly confronting. The sounds of lake water lapping against docks, distant pickup exhaust, and the soft swish of wet cedar leaves created a rhythm that punctuated the narrative, alternating between tension and brief moments of reflective pause, reinforcing YLMB, as Logan's subtle gestures toward permits, boundary markers, and visual evidence increased audience perception of strategic leverage and control, while Claudia's attempts at manipulation weakened incrementally under social observation. With every neighbor's gaze and whispered speculation, the social stakes escalated naturally, gossip circulating invisibly yet palpably, while the antagonist's emotional cracks deepened and the protagonist's quiet power and strategic transformation became increasingly evident in posture, voice modulation, and interaction with environmental cues. If you noticed anything that could have been better in this story or video, feel free to leave your feedback. We'd love to improve and make the next video even better. The cold morning fog swirled over the lake, wrapping the muddy shoreline in a veil of muted gray as Logan Pierce placed his coffee thermos on the gravel driveway, shifting from reaction to strategic calculation, eyes scanning the felled trees and boundary markers with precision, noting discrepancies and subtle HOA violations that could be leveraged for legal escalation. Claudia Whitmore stood rigid on the wet cedar-lined bank, her pink long-sleeve dress pressed against her, clipboard clutched as her smirk faltered, the first real cracks of concern showing under the weight of observation from neighbors leaning over docks and fences, whispers weaving through the air and amplifying social consequence, each glance carrying judgment. Logan's voice was measured, calm, and precise. The easements, permits, and documentation support full compliance. Your authority is being observed, as he subtly pointed to a stack of papers with highlighted zoning irregularities and insurance forms ready to be submitted to county officials, revealing new evidence that could expose HOA liability. The fog curling around him emphasizing visual dominance and strategic control. The wind tugged at wet cedar leaves, the distant slap of lake water punctuating the silence, and muted echoes from metal roofs and pickup trucks created an organic rhythm that underscored the prestige legal thriller vibe. While Claudia's polished manipulation began to falter, eyes darting to Logan's calculated placement of markers and his calm assertion of control, neighbors noting each interaction and the subtle shift in power. Logan crouched briefly by a fallen tree, scanning angles and distances, noting the potential impact of property documentation and insurance coverage, each measurement a tactical move to build a layered legal narrative. While Claudia's lips pressed tighter, passive-aggressive lines of justification failing under the growing community scrutiny. The soft murmur of nearby residents, the hiss of damp leaves in the lake wind, and the distant rumble of courthouse thunder layered social pressure and environmental tension, each element reinforcing the escalating power reversal as Logan transformed quiet anger into controlled dominance, his internal evolution marked by exhaustion tempered with strategic clarity, anticipating procedural responses and leveraging every observed weakness in the antagonist. Logan's gaze swept the foggy perimeter once more, subtle gestures toward legal documents and boundary markers reinforcing his leverage, while Claudia's confidence waned visibly, whispers of gossip and veiled judgment from neighbors forming a palpable social consequence. her attempts to reassert authority rendered ineffective against the calm, intelligent orchestration before her. Every step, glance, and environmental cue, the muddy shoreline, wet cedar, fog over the lake, distant courthouse rain, gravel driveway, and the subtle echo of community observation, interwove legal, social, and psychological escalation, each building toward a strategic counterattack phase where Logan controlled the narrative entirely, revealing both HOA overreach and potential liability in a manner that layered audience tension with cinematic realism. If you noticed anything that could have been better in this story or video, feel free to leave your feedback. We'd love to improve and make the next video even better. The fog hung heavier now over the lake, curling through wet cedar and settling on the muddy shoreline. As Logan Pierce observed the subtle shifts in Claudia Whitmore's posture, the pink long-sleeve dress clinging damply as her carefully maintained smirk faltered under the weight of mounting social scrutiny. Neighbors, discreetly gathered along docks and gravel driveways, exchanged glances and hushed whispers, the diner-like silence punctuated only by distant courthouse rain and the soft slap of water against pilings, creating an organic tension that highlighted Claudia's diminishing authority. "I assure you, this is all within my purview," she said, voice measured but brittle, attempting to reclaim dominance even as Logan's calm, controlled presence radiated strategic superiority, every gesture deliberate and emotionally layered, revealing the latent social and legal power at his command. As Logan gestured toward the carefully placed boundary markers and the felled tree line, it became evident that neighbors were leaning subtly away from Claudia, their quiet observation and the gossip building in whispered waves reflecting a community, shifting perception and social consequence. Each look a reinforcement of her public humiliation. The wind carried faint murmurs across the shoreline, punctuating the prestige legal thriller atmosphere, while the soft hum of distant pickup trucks and the damp rustle of leaves accentuated the layered emotional pressure, escalating Claudia's sense of panic and isolation as she realized the veneer of control was cracking under public and social scrutiny. Logan moved methodically, thermos in hand, observing every micro-expression, noting the growing unease as neighbors angled to see more clearly, the fog and muted sunlight enhancing the cinematic framing of both antagonist and protagonist, the subtle shift in power dynamics becoming palpable as social reversal took hold. Claudia's lips pressed tightly, eyes scanning the growing crowd and realizing that whispers were becoming a chorus, the passive-aggressive manipulation unraveling into visible irritation and concern, her entitlement visibly challenged, each micro-movement recorded in the collective perception of those watching, amplifying public judgment and social backlash. The lake water slapping against the docks, faint rumble of distant thunder, and soft hiss of wet cedar created a cadence of tension, alternating with brief reflective silences, reinforcing YLNB and preventing monotone escalation, while Logan's quiet anger, strategic clarity, and controlled dominance transformed observation into tactical leverage, layering legal, social, and psychological consequences with every careful gesture. The narrative momentum surged as neighbors' body language and quiet murmurs solidified the social reversal, Claudia's authority collapsing incrementally under combined legal and public pressure. The cinematic, fog-laden environment emphasizing emotional isolation and humiliation, each environmental cue enhancing the prestige thriller vibe, while Logan's calm, measured control and strategic foresight set the stage for layered payoff. If you noticed anything that could have been better in this story or video, feel free to leave your feedback. We'd love to improve and make the next video even better. The lake fog thinned just enough to reveal the glint of a sheriff's badge approaching along the muddy shoreline, the distant rumble of thunder punctuating the heavy diner-like silence, while wet cedar swayed gently in the cold morning wind, each sound layering tension as Logan Pierce remained calm, thermos in hand, eyes sweeping the community and carefully noting the formal arrival of county authority. Claudia Whitmore's posture stiffened, the pink long-sleeve dress damp and pressed, her clipboard now useless as the sheriff and a county investigator stepped forward, their presence a tangible institutional reversal, neighbors along docks and gravel driveways leaning closer, whispers amplifying social consequence, the subtle shift in power palpable across the fog-laden scene. This meeting is suspended until county review, the sheriff announced, voice firm yet procedural, echoing across the wet shoreline and reflecting the collapse of HOA authority. Claudia's smirk faltering into visible panic, lips pressed tight, eyes darting between the law enforcement presence and the growing assembly of observing neighbors, the social humiliation stacking visibly as Logan's calm, controlled posture radiated dominance. Soft rain dripped from metal roofs onto the gravel, distant pickup trucks idling silently, and the slap of lake water against docks punctuated the silence. Each environmental cue emphasizing the layered prestige legal thriller atmosphere, while Claudia struggled to maintain composure, the subtle twitch in her hand, the shifting weight of her body, signaling deepening concern and unraveling control. Logan gestured toward the already documented property markers and felled tree line, subtly indicating the legal leverage now fully recognized by institutional authorities, a strategic counterattack fully realized, while the neighbor's body language, avoidance of eye contact, and whispered discussion created layered social consequences that reinforced Claudia's isolation, her entitlement visibly challenged under both legal and community scrutiny. The wind carried faint murmurs across wet cedar and muddy shoreline, punctuated by the courthouse rain echoing against metal surfaces, layering cinematic tension and alternating rhythm between environmental observation, dialogue, and social escalation, maintaining YLNB and preventing monotone pacing. Each subtle micro-expression from Claudia reflected rising panic, while Logan's calm voice, measured gestures, and strategic positioning amplified the perception of controlled dominance and legal authority. The sheriff's presence, county investigation, and HOA board fracture signaling institutional collapse and public validation of the reversal. The neighbors' whispers escalated, creating a crescendo of social exposure and public humiliation, Claudia's control slipping entirely as Logan's strategic foresight and composed intelligence commanded the narrative, layered through environmental cues of fog, lake wind, and distant thunder, reinforcing both grounded realism and cinematic framing. If you noticed anything that could have been better in this story or video, feel free to leave your feedback. We'd love to improve and make the next video even better. The morning fog had lifted just enough for Logan Pierce to walk steadily along the gravel driveway, coffee thermos in hand, surveying the restored shoreline and reclaimed property with a sense of quiet victory. Each step deliberate as he noted the subtle environmental cues, the soft slap of lake water, damp cedars swaying in a mild wind, and scattered puddles reflecting the gray sky, layering a grounded cinematic tension that matched the emotional payoff of his strategic victory. Claudia Whitmore stood isolated at the far edge of the property, pink long-sleeve dress damp and pressed, clipboard abandoned, her entitlement fully undermined by the social reversal and institutional exposure, the murmurs of neighbors along docks and fencing accentuating her emotional isolation, while Logan's calm, controlled demeanor radiated reclaimed authority and public respect. You underestimated the reach of documentation and community observation, Logan said, voice measured and emotionally intelligent, gesturing to the fully restored boundary markers, legal notices posted, and the quiet yet deliberate rearrangement of the property's visual markers, signaling both legal and social victory. Neighbors, some still whispering and exchanging glances, now expressed subtle admiration for Logan's strategic precision and measured control, the social consequence for Claudia complete as she absorbed the humiliation, her confident facade replaced with a tense, flustered composure, power fully shifted. The fog drifted over the shoreline, soft drizzle tracing the wet cedar, the courthouse rain faintly audible in the distance, every environmental detail emphasizing both cinematic realism and the layered progression from shock to strategic dominance to emotional restoration. Logan walked slowly toward the reopened gate and restored workshop, each careful movement communicating dignity, reclaimed access, and the internal satisfaction of justice achieved, while community chatter continued in subdued tones, reinforcing both the social and psychological payoff for viewers. The scene alternated between the quiet contemplation of regained control, the visual indicators of HOA collapse, and institutional validation, and the subtle emotional healing evident in Logan's posture and calm gaze. The muted environmental sounds maintaining YLNB and preventing monotone pacing. Finally, Logan paused at the restored shoreline, mist curling around his boots, thermos in hand, surveying the subtle yet permanent reversal of social and legal power, the antagonist's isolation fully established and public humiliation complete, layered with ironic justice, reflective closure, and long-term consequence. In the aftermath, viewers are left with the resonance of social revenge, legal justice, emotional restoration, and the cinematic quiet of a community rebalanced, Logan's dignity and authority fully reclaimed, the fog over the lake and the quiet garage restoration providing a grounded, satisfying image of closure and contemplation. The story demonstrates the power of strategic observation, community accountability, and legal diligence, reminding viewers that persistence, intelligence, and measured action can overturn entitlement and passive-aggressive manipulation in any social or institutional setting. Rank the story from 10 to 0. I'd love to know what you think.